The good news about the SIE and Series 7 exams is that the math is not all that difficult. You don't need to know how to do calculus in order to answer all the questions right on these exams. But the bad news is that there's a whole lot of information that you need to learn and understand in order to be able to pass these things. So the daily study schedule that you follow is ultimately what's going to determine what kind of practice and how much practice you get in during your test prep window. That daily study schedule is key in being able to pass those tests. In this video, we're going to talk about what might be an optimal daily study routine. It's going to be largely based on the daily study routine that I followed when I was preparing for the exams, but also integrating some more relevant and more recent things that I know are working for a lot of other people. The number one factor in your daily study routine has to be the schedule that you choose. Picking a time each day or every other day. Some people really work like 70 hours a week, so they actually can't study during the weeks. And in those cases, you just have to study 8 to 10 hours a day on both Saturdays and Sundays. But whatever works well for your life, you need to pick and design that schedule and then stick to it. Actually hold yourself accountable and stick to it every single week. My recommendation is that you study 2 or 3 hours every single day leading up to your exams. If you have a few months or several months to spend studying before your SIE or before your Series 7, you could just do 2 hours a day, and you could only do weekdays if you wanted to do that for a total of 10 hours a week. But most people are trying to pass these exams in relatively short order, and in that case, I would recommend 3 hours a day, 7 days a week, which is twice as much study time, 21 hours a week. That amount of study is doable for 95% of the population. It might not feel like it right away, but if you truly audit every minute of your day, it is doable. And it's going to be very, very, very effective at forcing you to spend the amount of time necessary to learn enough stuff to pass the tests. It's that straightforward. In the firm that I work at, there are several newer people in the industry that have taken one or both of these exams or are just studying and prepping for the first one, the SIE. So there are debates going on about what the best schedule to study is and whether or not you should do it in the morning from like 5 to 7:30 a.m. or something every single day, or if that time should be spent going to the gym, and then when you get home from work you should study from 6 to 9 p.m. every evening and then eat dinner after that or something. The problem is if you want to play pickup basketball or play golf after work, then your study schedule totally goes away. And I am serious about the fact that sticking to a consistent and repeatable schedule that you force yourself to follow is going to be what will make the difference for the vast majority of candidates for the SIE or Series 7. The timeline isn't super important. If you're putting in 21 hours a week consistently, so other than telling you that you have to mandate your own schedule such that you actually spend the 3 hours every day or 2 hours every day, depending on what works best for you. Other than saying you got to do it, the best way that I know of to try to frame your thinking around the fact that this is a mandatory piece of your daily schedule is to treat it like a second job. Just literally pretend like studying is a second job. And in many cases, it sort of is if you need to get these exams done in order to progress in your career. And the reason that that advice works well is because once you think of something as a job, it takes away the debate on whether or not you're going to do that job. For the majority of us, right? The majority of us don't wake up in the morning and go, yeah, I don't know if I'm going to go to work today because I didn't sleep all that well last night, and I have some other things I'd like to do, and my friends are hanging out this afternoon, so I'll probably just skip it today. Like, no really well-functioning person just debates whether or not they're gonna go to work each day. It's just something that you do automatically. So if you can shift your thinking or reframe your thinking around studying to just be like a second job, I feel like I was able to do this successfully. I convinced myself enough that studying was just another job that I had. Then there's no debate on whether or not you're going to do it each night. You're just going to do it automatically. That reframing of thinking really gets rid of a lot of the give and take or the push and pull with internally, deciding when you're not going to study, because the human brain just works in a way that is going to encourage you to take the easy route all the time. And if you're actively having to push against that by trying to actively decide each day to study, it's going to be really difficult. So don't force yourself to decide each day, just do it automatically. Again, like waking up and going to your regular day job. It's a guarantee that you're going to make it happen. The next most relevant piece of your daily study routine is probably the material that you actually use to study, and I certainly recommend using a third-party test prep provider. There are great ones out there for the SIE and the 7. I still get this question now, and I use Kier. That was 8 or 10 years ago that Kier had this Series 7 study program that was called Pass Perfect. I believe Kier, K-I-E-R, still has a program out there. I'm not saying it's the best by any means, but it worked for me. Probably the most common test prep program is from Kaplan, and Kaplan is really well known at this point in the financial services industry, and they've done enough of the background work to know exactly what types of questions are getting thrown into these licensing exams. And that's important because the prep that they give you is going to be pretty high quality. Most people who have used Kaplan test prep programs report that they are pretty high quality. There's not going to be a huge difference between these different providers, so hopefully you can't really go wrong with what you choose, but stick with one once you make a decision and then stick with it. And then you really want to know what part of the test prep program they offer that you personally are going to be utilizing day in and day out. Personally, I really liked the video lessons. If the program you buy doesn't have video lessons, the study notes are just as good. But if you're sort of a visual or audio learner, anything other than reading, then video lessons can be pretty sweet. If you're in a time pinch or don't have access to a computer or headphones or something, sometimes like I was traveling on vacation, then I would just use the physical study notes. If you don't have physical books, you can use that like on your smartphone. But going through the video lessons for me worked really well. You watch them solve certain types of problems. You can pause the video and then solve it yourself, which is a practice I really recommend. Pausing the video periodically and making sure you either write down what you just learned or you practice it on your own, because it's too easy to watch a video and start to go, oh yeah, that made sense what they just said, but then not really like test yourself on what you just learned. It's too easy to hear something that seems right, but then not totally be able to replicate that work on your own. That's the one risk with video lessons. So just make sure that you're integrating some sort of periodic practice that works best for you, whether that be through practice questions or writing things down. If you're using study notes, you need to do basically the same thing, but I think it's a little more difficult to just get glazed over when you're actually reading study notes, because it's a little bit more, requires a little bit more work on your end. It doesn't matter to me, and I don't think it makes a big difference in like ultimate pass rates, which of those versions you decide to go with. Just use one most commonly, stick with it, and be consistent with it every day. And then I made sure at the end of each chapter, some chapters might only take you 2 hours to go through, but some might be 10 hours or 4 or 5 study days. But I would make sure at the end of every chapter to take whatever chapter quiz your test prep program is offering you, or if you need to get more practice in a certain chapter, you're going back through what you had read and working back through any practice questions that in a video lesson they had solved or in a study note that was presented to you. And if you need more practice questions, you usually can find these types of things online. There's tons of free Series 7 practice questions available from different providers on the internet. The last source of information can just be the actual text that you're studying from. Anytime that you get done with a body of work, whether it's a chapter or a section or however it's divided or defined, it's smart to take a little bit of time and quiz yourself on if you actually retained, and maybe more importantly, if you're actually able to replicate and answer correctly the work that you have just covered over the prior few days. Taking those pauses periodically not only serves as a check-in, but it also forces you to do more practice along the way. If you never pause to do a quiz throughout a whole 3-month study window, versus if you pause every few days to do a quiz, you're ultimately just going to end up doing so much more practice through these practice questions that you're going to be much better prepared for the real exam. So certainly quiz yourself along the way. Then in the last 1 week to 1 month, we'll say, well, maybe the last final study period, before you take the real exam, you want to be doing as many practice exams as you can get in. And whether or not these practice exams are equally as long as the real SIE or the real Series 7 is not all that important. But what practice exams do importantly is give you practice questions like you've been doing throughout the last handful of months, but give you practice questions of very different topic categories. So that differs from what I just described, because what I just described is like you go through the Municipal Securities Chapter 1. At the end of that chapter, you do a quiz. Chapter 2, end of that. And so each quiz that you took had questions that were very relevant to what you had been studying over the immediate couple of hours or few days. And that makes them easier. So when you get to full practice tests near the end of your prep program, you're going to be getting questions thrown at you that vary in in the content that's being asked of you. And that's going to force your brain to be a little more flexible. It's going to force you to be able to recall information better than the quizzes that you had been practicing with along the way. And it's ultimately more practice. More practice is going to be better than less. And it's through solving practice questions, getting them wrong, which I'll talk about here in just a moment, and then reworking to get the right answer, that your brain really learns. So very important in the last few weeks or couple of weeks before your SIE or Series 7 to take as many practice tests as you can and audit the questions you got wrong. Probably the best way to approach questions you get right is to assume that you know it and move on. Now, if you really didn't know and you guessed, I'm pretty sure I would mark those down as ones to go back and review, because you don't necessarily just want to skip a third of the ones you don't know or a quarter of the ones you don't know because you guessed A, B, C, or D correctly. But notate that that was one that you weren't totally sure on. And then the ones you get wrong, of course, especially if they're a question that you thought you knew how to do, but then you solve it incorrectly, those need to be reviewed again. And those are the best questions to practice and to learn from. They're sort of time consuming because they're from so many different chapters of your book or books. They're going to force you to go back and find formulas or find examples from all over the place. So give yourself plenty of time, like 3 hours a day, every day of the week, to progress through all of these things. But the practice that you're gonna get from going back through questions that you answered incorrectly, rereading, recomprehending information, and then maybe most importantly is doing those same questions again and then solving the answer correctly, that process that your brain goes through is the most beneficial thing you can do in terms of learning new information. Like getting something wrong, being like, why did I get that wrong? Looking at the information again, seeing how it was done correctly, comparing what you did incorrectly, and then realizing, oh, I used the wrong variable or whatever, or I thought it was this or that. And then, retaining that new knowledge, rereading the question, answering it correctly now with your new understanding. That iterative learning process cements information into the human brain. So that is where you're ultimately gonna get a lot of improvement just in the last handful of weeks. Actually, one younger guy in the office that I know of said he didn't have a passing score on a practice test until the very last practice test he took right before his actual SIE exam. And I think that's a testament to the fact that his brain was just exponentially retaining information through that iterative process that I just described, because that's what he spent the last few weeks doing. That is an extremely important process, and it requires, the point of this video, daily repetition in order to have enough hours to get all of that in. The last thing to share about perfecting your daily study routine is just that there's no way that you can be successful with a daily study routine for the SIE or the Series 7 exams if you're not rocking your best finance bro getup. If you don't have a white collared shirt with gray stripes and then a blue puffy vest and then some black rimmed glasses with a semi-messy side haircut or something like that, then you're just not nearly finance bro enough to learn this information completely. It's basically like telling the average couch potato out there to go run a marathon versus a trained Olympic athlete to go run a marathon. Obviously, if you're wearing your finance bro stuff, like some of the younger dudes in the office that I work at like to, man, they are just set up for success with that type of a look. And then it's really cool how you end up looking identical to every other finance bro out there. It's like you can go all the way along the east coast of the state of New Jersey and just be completely camouflaged amongst every other 18 to 34-year-old white male that exists in that region, which is nice because then you can always hide in the crowd. You never have to really put yourself out there. You never have to really do anything special in life because, hey, you're a finance bro just like the rest of them. So make sure to wear those finance bro clothes every time you sit down to study each day. And that's the end of my tips. So honestly, I wish you the best of luck in your studies, and let me know in the comment section down below if any of these things work for you, if they don't work for you, or if you have any other tips for others watching this video. Hope you're the best.